Well, hi, everyone. Hey, did you know that you will become like whoever you admire? So it makes a huge difference if you can admire people worth admiring, right? Admirable people. And today I want to introduce you to a person worth admiring. Hi, if we haven't met yet, I'm Doug Newton, pastor for 45 years, a national award-winning magazine editor, author of 24 books, and this is At the Intersection with Doug Newton, where scripture, culture, and character meet. And I'm here to help you pursue the kind of character needed to align with scripture faithfully and to engage culture graciously. Now, we're in season number 2. My goal in our troubled culture is to help you focus on good character, find it in the Bible, flesh it out in your life. So follow along with me, and I guarantee you will relate to your corner of the world with exemplary grace and fresh impact. Now, this is a no-gripe zone. Our question is not what's wrong with our culture. It's about what's the right way to respond. So you ready? Here we go. In November 2024, John Crane retired from the Indiana State Senate after 8 years of service. Not long before that, I had an opportunity to reconnect with him for an interview. Now, it took me a while to post this because not long after that, I paused my podcast due to some major opportunities that included introducing some top Pentagon officials and high-ranking Navy and Marine leaders to my approach to character formation. But now I'm back doing podcasts, and since last week's podcast was about success, I immediately thought of John Crane as a great example of character and true success, because ultimately, success is doing whatever we're doing with real character. And I wanted to roll this out for you today. So I hope you enjoy meeting him. Here he is.
Okay.
Well, folks, it's such a privilege, really, to be able to welcome John Crane here. Senator John Crane from the state of Indiana, state senator. John, thank you so much for giving your time to be here today.
You bet, Doug. Always great to be with you. Thanks for the invitation.
John, tell us what you're going to do, but we'll get to that in more detail a little bit later, but just tell us a little bit about where you're headed.
Yeah, thanks. I've been the privilege to be able to serve in the Indiana Senate since 2016 and have had a very positive experience. It's been difficult in many ways, but overall it's been a very positive experience. I actually announced late last fall that I was not going to be running for re-election, which was a surprise to many people in my area. But it's really driven by my desire to continue the work I've been doing in cultural leadership development and really helping people understand that each one of us has the ability, regardless of our position or title, to have significant influence with the people that God brings across our path. And I've been attempting to do that in the political space for many years and in other ways. But as I was weighing kind of where can I make the best contribution to trying to advance God's kingdom here on earth, to me, it's raising up the kind of leaders that can be light in the darkness. And so what I'm doing now is working on building out a professional leadership development program called the Crane Leadership Roundtables, and really trying to help leaders understand, how can you get better at having the kind of impact that you need to have in whatever vocational track you're in, whatever space you're serving in.
So I want to just break in here right now and you can kind of see what's coming. There is going to be all through this interview so many examples of good character that he exemplifies, not intending to just shine the light on him, but it's why he is admirable. So as you're listening, pay attention to some of those examples of character and how it is displayed in his life. Before we get into any more details, I want to play for the people just a few clips from a retirement ceremony, which, my goodness, it went on for a long time because they opened the floor for people to speak to the resolution. And I don't know 20, maybe some people spoke from
Hmm.
both sides
Hmm.
of the aisle. I found it so encouraging, first of all, that this kind of time was being taken to really draw people's attention to the kind of character traits that are operating in our political system. These are people who are people of character, and they hunger to do what's right and good
Yes.
and true and honest.
Yes.
So it's worth it. It'll do your heart good if you'll watch this. Okay, but let me give you just a couple little samples of this, and I'll bring it up on the screen here now.
I don't think probably 80% of the time we vote in the opposite direction. But I became to admire Senator Crane for being a man of integrity, a man of faith, and a true public servant, even though we might disagree on policy. He represented his constituents, he represented his community, and I admired his commitment to servant leadership and to inspire us to, even during difficult times, to stand for our principles and to do what is right. And for that, I will always be grateful to call Senator Crane my friend, and I appreciate you. Job well done, and congratulations.
All right, let me take you to another quick little sample.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the Senate, and Senator Crane, thank you for your service. Certainly appreciate it. I will say a few of the things that really stick out to me about you is you are the ultimate team player. Many of us come in here and want to file bills and want to make this better for our community or better for the state of Indiana. And you take the approach of, I'm not going to file many bills, but I want to help the other 49 of us develop better bills to better serve people. And I really appreciate that and your humbleness and willingness to do that and kind of just take a step back and, hey, how can I help serve my other senators? And ultimately, I think we all know what certainly impresses me the most and is, I think the most important thing and valuable thing is you're truly guided by your faith, your confidence and your faith and knowing that Jesus is your Lord and Savior, and that is your guiding star, and certainly appreciate that. So thank you again for your service, Senator Crane.
But mostly I want to ask, how many people besides me have you mentored?
There's a few.
For you that don't know, I got my seat moved temporarily, but the very opportunity that I got to go back, I went back. And then I got asked again, will you move again? No, I'm being mentored. I don't care that it's year 4, I'm being mentored. So thank you for that. You've taken me from a very scared senator to walking up here today. I appreciate you very much.
I don't know how else
Here
better
we
to
go.
say this. I mean, there's, you and I know we've disagreed on a lot of things, but I never felt like it was disagreement. And in a lot of cases, it wasn't. I mean, we were on the same side. And me, I think, I've hoped that the way I've conducted myself, I know we're from different parties, but in this room, in the service we bring to the state of Indiana, that should never matter because our service is to the people. And I truly can't think of someone so genuine in the way that is how you represent yourself at all times. The camaraderie, the civility, and I too will miss you and appreciate you.
Let me bring us back here.
Thanks for that little trip down memory lane, Doug.
Yeah, well, and
I told people when it happened, I felt like I was standing there for 40 minutes at my own funeral.
well, that's not a bad thing to get a little foretaste because I say in our character courses that we do, one of the most important things that you can do is imagine what you'd like to have people say at your funeral.
Yeah,
and
that's
then
right.
work your life in that direction, make decisions
right.
and choices in that direction, and you'll actually be kind of in effect writing your own eulogy. So
That's right.
anyways, you've definitely done it. And I probably did. I actually, there were other ones that were for one reason or another, I'd love to do that, but they were going to take a little bit longer because they had to unfold
Sure.
a little bit more. But before we move on, I'm going to throw these up on the screen here. These are the 12 character traits that I work with as. And let me break in here after I pop off the screen again. Just keep your eyes on this list of traits. And these are ones to kind of listen for because there's several of them through this podcast that you're going to notice. Oh, John Crane exemplifies that trait. He exemplifies that trait. So see if you can spot them all. My target traits for character. And as I go down through this list, The people who were talking, I mean, if you made a check mark beside, and if you could have, folks, if you could have listened to all of them, there'd be a check mark where people were literally using these words by almost all of them. And so, John, you are a person of character. You're a person worth admiring. Now, how did you turn out that way?
Well, first of all, that's very kind of you. Uh, I have to remind myself that I, like Paul, am the worst of sinners. And so, if there's any positive reflection in my life, it's a combination of God's grace, great parenting from two incredible parents, my wife, a lot of people around me that God uses to kind of knock off the sharp edges. And I'm still always a work in progress. But I think, to answer your question, we don't become the people that we are just by happenstance. I think it requires some level of intentionality, not only forward thinking, but proactive investment of time, effort, focus, all those things to try to become the person that we want to be. And I think I'm reminded of a quote from James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. He says that every choice that we make is a vote for the kind of person we want to be. And so, from a position of faith, obviously, if we choose to follow God every day, then do I get up in the morning and take some time to get into God's word and to pray, or not? And that choice right there can set the trajectory for the rest of the day.
We are trying to understand, not only how character develops, but also, how it shows up, what it looks like. You mentioned just a few minutes ago that some of your time in the Senate has been really hard. I know that one thing that you said in your closing speech that day was that you always had, because your mom and dad and your family was a military family, you wanted to serve. You really wanted to serve, but because of a physical issue, you couldn't. But that when you came into the experience in the Senate, you really began to recognize that the demands on you and on your time and some of the risk situations that you were in and having to deal with courage in the role you're in, that made you feel like you were kind of living your life in the same way you would have been had you actually been in active military service.
From my perspective, first of all, as you mentioned, I really wanted to be in the military very, very badly, and tried and wasn't able to do that, and really felt disheartened because I just have a deep, deep love for our country. So when I was able to serve in the Senate, as I told my colleagues that day in February at that ceremony, I said, this has been a very redemptive journey for me, because this was God's way of saying, hey, I see your heart. I see you want to serve. I know you've had this deep inside of you for so many years, and you serving in the American military wasn't meant to be, but this is the way that I want you to serve the state and nation. Now, there are some similarities in terms of difficulties, as you pointed out, between what I'm doing in the military. But, let's be clear for the audience. It's not typically a life and death situation on the floor of the Senate. So I want to limit that analogy to a degree. But there are difficulties in the political process. I tell people all the time that when it came to politics, I used to have all the answers. And then I got elected to office. And then you begin.
By the way, did you notice when he kind of limited that analogy between being in the Senate and being in the military? That's just one example of the integrity, because a lot of times people want to overstate things. And integrity is what he just did back then, when he said, I just don't want to overstate that analogy of, being so close to being, on the front lines in military, because it's not life and death. So I just thought that was a great example.
To realize this is really tough. So for me, the way that things got very hard at least shows up in two key ways. One is the political pressure that's required in making the decisions you're required to make, especially on the big ones that are really controversial. We in the state of Indiana were able to outlaw abortion in the summer of 2022. We've now eliminated 98% of the abortions in Indiana. But that special session that we had in the summer of 1992 or 2002, I'm sorry, that special session we had in 2022 was the most difficult season of my career because we were the first state in the country after the Dobbs decision to take up that issue and try to outlaw abortion. And so there was a white hot spotlight on our Capitol, and protesters came out by the thousands. And many of them were not nice at all. They were pretty nasty and mean. And yet you had to keep soldiering on. And so we managed to do that. That was very hard. But the other thing that really has been difficult for me and for many of my colleagues is the level of criticism, critique, denigration that you get as a political leader consistently. And it isn't just on, you said something and it was a verbal misstep, and so people are criticizing you. I'm talking about you're a political leader, and simply because you're a political leader, people think it's open season, and I've had people talk about not only policy positions, but many times it's not about that. It's about my personality, my character, my family, my weight. I mean, it's just any number of things that people decide they want to come after you on. Well, that becomes a little daunting at some point.
Yeah, sure.
And so you have to try to kind of navigate that and weather it. And sometimes it comes from colleagues inside the Senate who are on your team, who theoretically you should be sticking together and working things out whenever there's a disagreement. But I've had people who, have come after me on things that there was some miscommunication and they took it a different way, and they still haven't talked to me for years because of it, and longtime friends prior to that. So you do the best you can. Where you can try to make amends, you try to make amends. I don't think you dwell on it too much. Otherwise, you're just going to be kind of walking around with a ball and chain. You just keep pressing forward and doing the best you can. But it's certainly a difficult environment sometimes to be able to maintain that level of character. But as I tell people, especially for those of us who are more verbal about our Christian faith, you can't afford to flinch even once. Because if you put yourself out there as I am a follower of Christ, and then the wrong kind of words come out of my mouth, or the wrong kind of attitude comes out, or whatever it is, then I have sullied the reputation of Christ as much as I've sullied the Crane reputation. And that's just not something we want to try to do. And so we try to do the best we can to be as consistent as we can be every day.
Yeah, even as you say that, I was thinking about how much courage it takes. And again, I appreciate you kind of backing away to too strong a correlation between the military life and on the battlefield and being in the Senate. And I appreciate that you're honoring those who actually serve in the foreign fields like that and take life or death matters. But to most people, the feeling of being rejected, losing reputation, being misunderstood is almost as threatening. And so I'm thinking of courage and the courage that you have to show to do that. You actually answered the question I was going to ask, is so where does that courage come from? And obviously one of the things that I'm hearing you say is that you have such a strong desire to not sully the name of Jesus or the Christian faith and reputation, that can help you.
It does. And I think, obviously you've got to pray and depend on God to help you, especially when the moments get tough. I talked about that special session in the summer of 2022. Hands down the hardest season, but the easiest vote I've ever cast, because the abortion issue is the life issue actually is a cornerstone issue, right? If you know where you stand on core principles and why you stand there, in my experience, that gives you a greater ability to pursue courage. We might not always get there, but it gives you a greater ability to pursue courage. Because the real challenge, especially in politics, is the fear of not getting reelected, right? That's the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
I need money and I need votes. And that way I can just continue to perpetually sit in the seat and try to make a difference in public service. Well, that fear of not getting reelected causes many good leaders to make decisions that, if they had the total freedom to make the decision they would prefer to make, might make a more courageous decisions, but they kind of tap the brakes a little bit. And I get it. I feel it. I've probably done it in a variety of ways. But if you know where your identity is, that my identity is not in the title of senator, that, titles are tools. And so if I can use my title and my position as a senator to help people, fantastic. That's why God has brought me here. But my identity is in Christ. And if I understand that, then in my experience, it gives me greater ability to pursue courage. And when those moments come where you can say, hey, you know what? If the world hates me because I took a pro-life position, can I be okay with that? And the answer is, yes, I can. I can put my head down on the pillow at night and know that, in our case, we're saving thousands of babies every year, and helping mothers who are in crisis pregnancies and all those kinds of things. But that's because my identity is not wrapped up in the title that God's blessed me to have.
Yeah, so I just loved several things that came through there. I mean, hopefully you're noticing it, and I hardly even need to say anything. But just, did you catch that part where he really emphasized even good people can set aside their principles and convictions because of that pressure to maintain constituencies and so forth? Well, that is that is an example of how respect functions as a character trait, where he can look at the situation and he can still see those folks as good people. And it's also the generosity of spirit to be able to not impugn their motives when they may do something like, make a decision against their principles just to keep the money flowing or keep the votes coming. So again, these are just wonderful character traits that didn't want to let pass by. Yeah, so look at this list that's on the screen there. I usually ask people this question in a different way, or I ask a different question at this point. Look at this list and pick out one that you would say, other than courage, might have been the hardest trait for you to show.
Yeah. The average person would say integrity among politicians, right? Because, politicians have this reputation for being corrupt. But to me, I'm privileged to serve with a lot of people who have a great deal of integrity. I would say probably the one that's most challenging is humility. And first of all, I think politics is one of these environments where you have to be confident. And basically, when you're campaigning, you have to wave your hand and say, I'm the best guy here. I'm the best guy in the race. Vote for me. And for me personally, I struggled with that. I still feel confident about my abilities, and I feel confident about my experience and positions on the issues and all those kinds of things. But to wave your hand and say, hey, I'm the best. It was difficult as a Christian to fully embrace that. And so I had to navigate that. It was also, for me, seeing your name and your face on these big billboards and all this stuff. And it's like, that was a little bit out of my comfort zone. So I told people, and I've told people since, that I'm not really a very good politician, because oftentimes the messaging from politicians is, here's what I'm going to do. Or when they get elected, here's what I did this, I helped you with that, I. Yeah. And to a degree, I get it. You're trying to let your people know that you're doing the job. But to me, I have developed both intentionally, and now somebody told me, they heard me saying it, so it must be subconscious, changing I to we. right? So we were able to do this. We were able to do that. We are trying to advance this public policy in our state, et cetera. And that's simply because leadership is a team sport. There's certain things that I've been blessed to be able to have some influence with, and my fingerprints are on a few things. But at the end of the day, it's a team sport, and it's all of us coming together. So I've just continued to try to battle humility, because as much as I say titles are tools, it is easy, and the enemy will kind of feed you this little line of how important you are because you're in an important position of leadership
Right.
and influence. And it's easy to walk into a room and have other dignitaries acknowledged, for example, from the stage, and you're quietly going, wait a second, what about me? I'm important, that kind of thing. And so I have to check my spirit in some of that stuff and go, you know what? It doesn't matter. If nobody knows who I am, guess what? It doesn't matter, because but for the grace of God, we're all nobodies.
I mean, that's excellent. That whole issue of having to have confidence and still be humble is
Yeah.
a struggle for a lot of people. One of the things that we teach in our character stuff is that there are two ways to take a humble position. One way is to lower yourself. The other way is to lift the other person up. You arrive at the same kind of gradation, but one is by lifting others up. And that if you take that approach to humility, you don't have to get as hung up about expressing confidence in yourself and things
Yeah.
like that, because it's not
Exactly.
about lowering yourself. It's about
Yeah.
making sure that you're lifting other people up. And I love
Well,
how you,
years ago, I brought Mike Pence, and this was before he was the vice president. He was actually running for governor in our state back in 2012. I brought him in to talk to a group of our student leaders. And one of the things that he said was along those lines. He said, when it comes to your leadership team, and this is my paraphrase, if it goes well, give credit. If it goes badly, take the blame.
yeah,
And it's that same type of thing where you're running a buffer for your team and trying to elevate them when things go well, so that they can be empowered to accomplish even more. But it takes a strong, very self-confident leader to be able to do that. And it's a great temptation to buy into the hype. And so we have to always guard against that, I think.
Well, in the time that we have remaining, I'd love to just have you just give our listeners, our viewers, just a little bit of a taste of your heart, your vision for what you're heading into now when you retire from the Senate.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. It's been an interesting process. We're still in that transition. And I don't question at all the decision to step away from the Senate. I think that's God's next step for me is unfolding more of this leadership development. There's an adage that people often say that politics is downstream from culture. And I tend to agree with that politics is actually more of a reflection of culture than it is a proactive influencer of culture. But those that say that, I don't often hear them asking what to me is the obvious next question. If politics is downstream from culture, then what is upstream?
Huh.
And in my estimation, what is upstream is what I call the war of worldviews, or the battle for thought leadership supremacy, right? So basically, it's the philosophical idea war. Whoever wins that gets to influence everything downstream in politics, in arts and entertainment, in media, in education, in tech, all these different cultural sectors. And so I've been working in that space for quite some time. I am a huge advocate for Christian worldview understanding and application. As I tell people all the time, especially Christian audiences, where I get opportunities to speak to Christian audiences, is that one of the best ways that we can really change our culture is to develop a strong, strategic, and robust Christian worldview discipleship strategy for our churches. Helping people understand that Christianity and the Christian worldview is not just a slice of reality, it is reality. So it's not
Right.
just one option on the coexist bumper sticker. It's actually the option, and everything else is subservient to that. So that's a huge passion of mine. I've been blessed to sit on the National Board of Directors for the Colson Center for Christian Worldview for the last 4 years.
Wow.
And we're working hard to try to continue to equip churches and schools in that way. Now, the reason I say all that is because my other passion is leadership. And the definition that we use with leadership is that leadership is about intentional influence. And what that means is leadership is a choice. It doesn't necessarily mean that every person is a leader, but it does mean that every person is a potential leader, depending on what they choose to do. If they choose to have influence with whoever it is that crosses their path. And so that has evolved into this Crane Leadership Roundtable concept, which is really helping professional leaders get better at being their best, wherever they are. It's not limited just to next generation leaders. It's for all professional leaders in kind of three sectors. So one sector would be business professional space. Another sector would be the government political space. And the third sector would be the nonprofit church space, all of which need professional leadership development. It's biblically based, but it's not always overtly biblically sourced. So even when we're inviting people to participate, we're not, trying to turn it into a Sunday school class and teach them chapter and verse. But it is an opportunity ultimately for those that are interested to take that next step and have another next series of conversations about some of the sourcing behind key leadership concepts like servant leadership. I talk about, for example, in politics, everybody gets frustrated by what's going on. And I tell audiences, like, we got to drop your pitchforks and torches and adopt what I call golden rule diplomacy, right?
Yep,
Well, that's
right.
a biblical concept. So there's ways to talk about it without having to be overly preachy. And my goal there isn't to hide the faith. It's just to widen the door
Right.
for solid leaders that need to step in and need to learn these things and then give me an opportunity to ultimately source those principles. We're designing it practically so that I describe it as the leadership development program for the busy leader. So it's 4 half-day sessions every other week. So it's about a 6-week commitment to be a part of the cohort. And all of that is driven by what have I learned over the last 8 years that I wish I'd known before. And now that I've learned it, how can I share it with as many people as possible so that they can get even better at engaging and having influence with the people that are in their sphere of influence. So it's really exciting. I'm just looking forward to seeing how God's going to unfold that. And prayerfully, we're exploring how to scale that and so forth. So,
Because the Lord does keep unfolding your life.
Yeah.
And everybody's life is different and their sphere of influence is different. But the Lord is always doing special things. He's got good plans, and his plans always involve wanting to use us to influence people toward
That's right. And
righteousness
the key
goodness.
thing there, whether we have 20 years, 40 years, or,
Or
2
two.
years, is are we using the time that we have? Because that's the asset that no matter how hard we work, we never get it back.
Right.
So are we living on mission every single day, understanding that God brings people across our paths that, they're coming across our path because he wants us to be the one to have the influence with them. And are we on mission? And that to me should be the driving question for every leader, but especially Christian leaders. I appreciate all the good work that you're doing, and I appreciate the invitation to be able to come on here and have a little conversation with you. And just it's been wonderful. So thank you.
Yes, and it's been a real gift, and a gift to me and gift to those that are going to be watching this for time to come. So again, John, thank you so much. Blessings on you, blessings on your whole family.
You bet, you bet. And
kids.
one last thing I'll say, if anybody wants to get more information, or if you've got groups that you would like me to come and speak to, they can always come and find out what I'm doing at craneleadership.org, and all my stuff is on there. So appreciate it, Doug. Thank you so much.
We'll actually put that in all the notes below this. When it's online, we'll have that contact information for people. So anyways,
Fantastic.
Thank you, John, and we'll say goodbye to our listeners. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Well, I sure hope that you enjoyed that and you see why I wanted to interview him. I mean, it was just example after example after example of really important character traits. And I loved some of the quotes that he gave. You may want to actually watch that a second time. That's the fourth or fifth time I've watched it, and every time I pick up something else, a kind of a quotable quote or a thought that comes into my mind as a result of watching that. Well, that's it for this week. I'll be back next week for a regular At the Intersection with Doug Newton podcast. So glad that you tuned in today. Would you please click on that subscribe button and just like this podcast? It's very encouraging, but it's also influential on the algorithms, as they tell me. So if you would do that, that would be great. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time.